Hello, wonderful people of the internet. My name is Matthew. Welcome to Matthew Talks About American Literature and More. Today, I'm going to be giving you the top 10 tips on how I read as much as I do. About a week ago, one of my friends, Georgy, who's been a very big help to this channel, shout out to him, he asked me what are the tricks that I use to read as much as I do, and I thought that'd be a good idea for a video. Now, these aren't really tricks, but just a bunch of general reading rules I keep in the back of my mind, so I keep a pretty steady reading pace. I started reading avidly about 3 years ago, and I've never looked back, and these principles have helped me along the way. If you're looking to get into that, better this than nothing, I say. Number 1, only read one book at a time. I am a very strictly monogamous reader. I can't read more than one book at a time. I only have one book that I read at one time. I pick it up, I start it, and I either finish it or I put it aside. I make it a point that I'm not going to read that book, with the knowledge that I don't like it and I'm not going to finish it. Look, there may be people online and on book social media that can read multiple books at a time, and that's fantastic. And if that's the case for you, more power to you. But believe me, doing that will slow down your reading pace. And as someone who does want to get the most out of each individual book, but at the same time wants to keep a steady pace, that's something that doesn't work for me, especially if you want to get started into reading. Only read one book at a time with the knowledge that you're either going to finish it or you're going to decide you don't want to read it and put it aside. The second tip is what I like to call the Prose taste test. I did an early video on it. It's basically this. You go into a bookstore and you've had an idea of like, this is a book that I kind of want to read. You pick up the book, and before you buy it, you turn to the first page. And without stopping, try to read the entire page at once. From beginning to end, like, don't go back and see, like, oh, do I need to reread that? No. Just try to finish that first page and see if you can get everything out of it. I'd also recommend extend that to 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 pages. Now, those couple pages, they don't have to jump your heart rate. They don't have to give you a catharsis. They don't have to tell you everything that you need to know about that book in the beginning. But what you're trying to see is that if that author's prose style flows with you. This is different for everyone. But if I have the feeling that that didn't feel good, I don't think I was able to follow the flow of what that author was saying. That likely means that that author's prose or prose style isn't working for you. And I suggest, especially if you're just starting with reading, put it aside, try another book. And out of all the books you try, get the one that flows most easily. This is different for everyone. For example, I mentioned this to my friend. Of the 2 big Russian authors, I think Tolstoy flows where Dostoevsky is a drag. Where with other people, it can be the reverse. But you gotta test it out for yourself. Number 3, always carry a book with you. I like to say that books are one of the few objects that are always on me. It's my phone, which I'm using to record, my wallet, my keys, my earbuds, and a book. I always carry it in my backpack. I always have it around. And that doesn't mean that you have to flip it out every time you have a spare minute. But if you have a situation where you may have a lot of time to spend in a chair, for example, in a doctor's office where you have to wait a while, or if you're a student like me, you're sitting in a chair waiting for your class to start, pop out a book and read it for like 5-10 minutes, or however long you have until you have something else to do. That's the benefit of always having a book with you. Number 4, set a reading goal and be flexible with it. I always have 2 bookmarks with me. One is where I am in a book, and one is where I want to be in a book by the end of the day. Now, I always make it a point. I am going to get to that point by the end of the day, but I'm always flexible with it. There are times where I like say, oh, I'm tired today, I'm busy today, I'm not going to be able to get to the page goal. So I put my second bookmark earlier in that book. And don't beat myself up about it. Like, that happens all the time. There are books that I thought I was going to finish in a few days, and it took me a week. There are books that I thought I was going to finish in a week, and it took me a couple weeks, even a month to finish. So, don't feel bad. Set a reading goal. Try to meet it, but also don't feel bad if you don't. Tip 5. Carefully curate. This tip relates to the 3rd and 4th tips, in that you need to have a group of people whose opinion you trust to recommend you books that they've read that you think that you'll enjoy and you'll fly through. I will make a video on this later on how I use Goodreads. I have a set of critics and users on Goodreads that I trust, that if enough of them like it, I think, okay, this is going to be a book for me. And I have my own personal reading taste. But I tend to find books that I know that I love and that I can breeze through. And don't feel bad if you happen to be recommended a book that you don't like. Reading is probably one of the most subjective arts that there is. Every reader's experience can be different. But once you have that set of people that you trust to recommend you books that you enjoy, keep them close, follow them on social media, on whether that's Goodreads, YouTube, whatever, and keep an eye out on what they say about the books and see if it'll work for you. Tip 6. If a book is bad, stop reading. That's not to say that there is no merit in reading books because you want to understand why other people like them or because you want to become a better reader. But if you're reading too many books that you don't enjoy, that's going to kill your love of reading more than anything. As a general rule, if a book hasn't grabbed you by the first third or after the first 200 pages, stop reading it. And for newer readers, I recommend changing that to the first quarter of a book or 100 pages, or better yet, 100 pages minus your age. As you're older, you have less time to read bad books. In general, books should be intriguing. They should want to make you come back and want you to keep reading them. For example, a book I just reviewed, Flowers for Algernon. I read like 200 pages of that book in one day. Whereas another book that I decided I don't want to read it, it's not just because I didn't like a lot of it, but because I knew I wasn't at the level to read that book. That book was called Mason and Dixon. I read 200 pages of that book before I decided to give up. That took me 2 weeks. So if a book isn't clicking, for whatever reason, put it aside, pick up a new book. Tip 7. Try to make the time to read. This is one where it all depends on you. Your life can be busy, but for me, no matter how busy life is, I try to carve out at least half an hour a day where I'm going to try to read a book or try to finish a book during that time. Now, if you're really busy, I understand why this may not be the case. But before I go to bed, I always try to get at least 10, 20 pages in of a book that I'm reading before I go to bed. And I find that even when life gets pretty busy, you can usually keep a steady reading pace in that case. I suggest the best times are before you go to bed or just after you wake up. But it all depends on you. Tip 8. Read sporadically. Now, this kind of relates to tip 7, but I tend to read books very sporadically. When I sit down to read, I do try to keep distractions at a minimum. Like, I don't have the TV on when I read. I try to not check my phone. But when you're reading a book, there are going to be moments where you just want to let the drama take in. There are moments where you need to think, or moments where you're just not feeling it and you need to get in the groove. There have been times when I have sat down to say, like, okay, I'm going to read like for 30 minutes and try to get 30 pages. There are times where I've read for 5 minutes, I've read for 5 pages, and I put it aside and they're like, okay, I want to meditate on that a little bit, or that there's something else I wanted to do, I want to check my phone real quick, and I come back as soon as I can. But there have also been times where I am just loving a book so much and you're getting that momentum, and I did not want to put the book down, and I sit and read for as long as I can. If you set out to read for 30 minutes, don't be ashamed if you read sporadically for 5 minutes and then you do something else, or you get in the groove and you read for an hour. It happens. Be prepared for that. Tip 9. Read smaller books. While my personal favorites are long, epic books, I do understand that, especially for new readers, that reading smaller books, reading short books that can pack a punch in like less than 200 pages, or maybe in 100 pages or less, is a good way to keep a good reading goal. I consider reading kind of like meals. Of course, everyone loves that big juicy steak, that big glamorous meal at Thanksgiving, but every now and again you want to have a good snack, a good little drink to balance out your reading. And while I'm a long book lover, I've noticed if you read a lot of very long books back to back, unless they're some of the best books that you're ever going to read, and if they are, that's amazing. But even if they're just good, people can get burned out very quickly by long books if they don't deliver. So I go kind of long, short with my reading. I try to read one long book, one short book, and that helps me keep a steady reading pace. My 10th and final tip is keep a book stack. If you're only reading one book, that's fine. But if a book is bad and you don't have anything else to read, you're likely to imprint that experience on that book to reading in general. What I like to do is that I always like to keep a stack of books on the cabinet behind my bed. I keep them there because when I'm reading and I'm reading a book that's not too good, or this book is kind of disappointing, I thought it was going to be awesome, but it wasn't, I say to myself, there are 8 books there. Not all of them are going to be new favorites, but there's probably one in there that you are going to lap up, absolutely adore, even if the book that I'm reading is bad. I find that acts as a form of wishful thinking that can keep my reading pace up. It's also a good indicator to say when you're not going to finish a book. If you're reading a book and it's not captivating you enough, and you find that you're more excited for the books that you haven't read yet, that's definitely a sign that this book is not good enough and you want to pick up a new book. So, those are the 10 tips that I use for reading. I hope that you found this video useful in some way, and I hope that this helped anyone who comes by to find and read more books that they enjoy. So, hope you're having a lovely day. Hope this video finds you well, and happy reading.